Good afternoon and welcome to the weekly edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Paul Spey, WRAL State Government Reporter.
And it may be the middle of June, but we are no closer, it would appear, to a budget at this point. Both House Speaker Destin Hall and Senate Leader Phil Berger, they say that they're having talks. They say they're working on it. But when I talk to the guys who are actually on the conference committee, they say they're not really.
Don't count on those raises. If you're a state employee coming through anytime soon is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and more to the point, is Helene relief. That's gotten tied up in all this, and so that's the thing that's really up in the air, because just this week we had some folks again come down from the mountains to talk to lawmakers. Unfortunately, they were there Monday and lawmakers weren't, but to again draw attention to the fact that they're waiting for this state aid, right? And right now it's tied up in politics,
right? And another thing that's problematic right now is, let's say these corner offices come to some sort of agreement next week. Well, then you have to call everybody back to vote on it, and in many cases, people I know of legislators who are on vacation. They're on another continent right now. And so who knows when they'll be able to actually, A, strike a deal, and B, convene again to get these things through.
Yeah, well, we do know that they're still planning to go ahead and take a break at the end of the month. That was the word that we heard this week from House Speaker Destin Hall. He has said all along that he's planning on a couple of long weeks, his next couple of weeks. And if you've looked at the schedule for Tuesday, he's not kidding. But they say that they're going to take a break after that, and that break could be a week and it could be 6 weeks. We just don't know the answer to that. So.
Right.
All right. Well, in the meantime, big news this week hitting Greensboro. JetZero, WRAL broke that story, Jack Hagel. 14,500 jobs up to, excuse me for being skeptical on that, $4.7 billion investment up to. And the company might qualify for up to $1 billion in job development investment grants, JDIGs. Those are the dollars that you get if you create jobs. But if you don't create the jobs and the target, then you don't get that money.
Right. I think there tends to be some confusion over that.
Yeah.
This is not a handout. They have goals, very tangible goals they have to meet and provide reports on throughout the years. What was interesting to me is that, and forgive me for not knowing this, but that Greensboro's become this sort of hub for the aviation industry. Yeah. Not only is JetZero coming, and they announced, if it all comes together, it'll be the biggest job announcement in this century, this side of year 2000. But they also have Honda, and what's the other one? It's
Honda Jet and Boom Supersonic.
Boom Supersonic. That's the one I always forget. Those three are all out there around that Greensboro airport, and it's becoming a thing, a hub.
Once you get that critical mass and you get that workforce, then other companies want to come, you know, and suppliers and things like that, because there's enough work,
Right. And Jack was saying that a lot of it has to do with the courses offered by the community college out there.
GTCC?
That they're adapting and offering classes that have to do with working in the aviation industry and things like that. And so it's sort of amazing to see it pay off. Greensboro's on the edge of our market here, and so sometimes we hear about it and sometimes we don't. But it's fascinating to me.
It is fascinating. But, I just think about, JetZero has never put a plane in the sky.
Right.
Okay. Now, they have backing from some big airlines, and I'm assuming those big airlines would not be throwing money at them if they did not believe that this was a plausible business idea venture, right, that this was going to materialize. But we also have Boom Supersonic, who, they've been here for a couple of years now. I don't think we haven't seen a plane yet.
Right. And so they do different things. Boom Supersonic is trying to create one of those supersonic airplanes. Right. Weren't they legal at one point, but now they're not?
They were. It was after the Concorde crash they banned them.
And
or they just stopped making them. I'm not sure they banned them. I think they're just,
They go at faster than the speed of sound?
Faster than the speed of sound.
And so that's one. And then with JetZero, it's not the same thing. They're supposed to be more, I guess, fuel efficient or something. But if you look at them, they look kind of crazy.
They do.
Just in my opinion.
It's like a stealth jetliner.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. They're triangular, and not just the wings, but the body of the plane is triangular. When you look at their models on their website, people should go look for themselves.
It's pretty cool.
It's cool. It looks like there are a lot fewer window seats. A lot more people would be seated in the belly of the plane, in the middle. Once these finally take off, it'll be interesting to see just how popular they become.
Well, they say that design is supposed to be a lot more fuel efficient. So I think that's why some of the big airlines are backing them, because they see the potential for savings here, because jet fuel is a huge amount of the expenses that go into any airline flight. But I was also going to add to that list VinFast, which
that's right.
has kind of stalled out. And so I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying I tend to be a little skeptical about some of these, whether or not we're really going to, I guess when you go out to get these cutting edge businesses, there's always going to be a risk that things get delayed or that they don't come through.
Sure. It's sort of and industries are so, stagnant in many cases that it's like, all right, I'll believe it when I see it. When you start taking off from Greensboro with this plane and there's a plan to put them into the fleets
or
of
the
United.
Supersonic or the VinFast or whatever. Yeah.
That's when we'll start to believe. We'll see.
We'll see.
But
I hope it turns out, because that's great news if it does.
Right. For North Carolina politicians, amid all these budget talks, which are controversial and people have a bunch of opinions about, it was another little kumbaya moment when they're like, hey, look at our state. We're great. We're first in aviation, and, our corporate tax rates are low, and we're beating the competition.
That was pretty much the only kumbaya this week, though.
Yeah.
There was a lot of not kumbaya moments this week, and that's because a couple of really hot topics emerged and got voted on this week. The House and Senate both voting on immigration bills. The Senate was voting on the one written by Speaker Dustin Hall that would sort of lay out, it would expand the number of crimes for which somebody would need to have their citizenship status checked. But it would also lay out exactly how long a sheriff has to keep somebody in jail after they should be released while they're waiting for ICE.
Right. And that sort of harkens back to some of the bills they've had in the past where they've tried to force sheriffs to keep these people wanted by ICE. So.
Right. So that's one of them. And then the one that seems to have gotten more attention and more pushback was Senator Berger's bill that has to do with sort of, trying to make the state less attractive to immigrants, to undocumented immigrants to live here. So trying to make the state agencies, even like things like public health clinics, would have to check citizenship before providing services. Like schools would have to cooperate with ICE. It's pretty sweeping.
Were the universities in there too? Did
Yes.
I see that? Yeah. So it's not just what would sheriffs and local police departments do if they came across an undocumented immigrant in their car driving without a license or something like that. It's
much larger. If
you go to your local health department for services, you're going to get background checked essentially. Things like that.
Yeah. So anyway, both of those bills are on the governor's desk right now. It seems like the ICE bill he might allow to become law. I'm thinking the sheriff's bill, just because it's already law, and this doesn't go that much further with it. And he issued a statement this week saying that he believes that people who commit crimes who are here illegally should be deported.
Right.
The other one he has not commented on, and that one might be a harder sell. But we'll see. We'll see what he does. He's got until next Friday, I think, or Saturday to do something with those. And then the other big one this week was guns, and this is a bill, also another Berger bill. This is a bill that would get rid of the concealed carry permit and lower the age for carry to 18 for a handgun. So
if you're 18 years old, and correct me if I'm wrong, you could go out and buy a gun and then carry it on you wherever you went under this bill.
Yeah. Well, as long as it wasn't banned at that place.
Right.
Posted or, places that you can't carry a gun.
Right. State Fair, one of those places.
But there's a little problem with that. And the problem is that if you don't have the training to know where you can and can't carry a gun, you might end up not knowing that answer.
Right. And for concealed carry permits now, you do have to go through some training.
Yeah, it's 8 hours. And some of that's classroom time. And they go through some basic gun safety. They go through gun laws, like where you can and can't carry. They go through live fire safety. And you get a criminal background check. So, that way, even if somebody gives you a pistol, there's still a criminal background check involved before you can carry it concealed. But, in this case, all of that would fall by the wayside. So no training, no criminal background check, unless you bought it, unless you get one when you buy the gun.
Now, this does seem like something Stein's gonna veto. I mean, I can't see any way he doesn't, right?
Well, there were some people, even Republicans, who said that they see this as problematic. I mean, I understand, I understand the argument on the other side too. They say, the Constitution, the Second Amendment guarantees your right to keep and bear arms. It doesn't say that the government can tell you how you have to keep them or where you can bear them.
Sure,
right?
I can certainly see how they come with that.
Yeah, and they say that as long as you're a law-abiding citizen and you're 18 years old, the age of majority, you should have the right to carry a gun. And you shouldn't have to get permission from the government. I get that. On the other hand, though, there's the other side who's concerned about, for example, cops walking up to people now and people not knowing how to handle their gun and not knowing what they have to do if they're approached by a police officer.
Right.
And policemen worried about everybody's carrying a gun potentially, you know. And especially folks who are, younger, 18, thinking, some people say, well, they're kind of hot-headed. They're not quite fully, their judgment, their decision-making not quite fully mature yet. But we do let 18-year-olds serve in the Army. Right. And there are a lot of states where 18-year-olds carry guns.
Right. Which two Republicans was it that were against it?
Well, there were two that voted against it, and there were several others who sort of were not present for the vote.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Davis voted against it, and so did Brisson.
Okay.
And they both said that they had gotten a lot of feedback from their constituents, their Republican constituents.
Right.
People who have concealed carry permits saying, this is not a good idea. This training is important to make sure that people around you are safe and that you are safe.
Right. And this has not gone through both chambers yet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it has. That was the last vote. Okay.
That's on the governor's desk.
Okay. Oh, man. Yeah, I can't. It'll be interesting to see. My anticipation would be that he will veto it, and then it sounds like they might have trouble overriding that veto.
It's funny. Destin Hall said, the math doesn't really math.
Yeah.
On that one. Because they've got some Republicans who just, especially in swing districts, who just do not want to go home with this,
Right.
And, I don't know. We'll see. But that was one of Senator Berger's big priorities. He, of course, is running for re-election. He faces what looks like pretty tough primary challenge.
Right. So on one hand, we have the most powerful Republican in the Senate who has to win a primary. And then, look at the House, and you see some districts where Republicans are in purple districts. I mean, even here in Wake County, we have Erin Pare. Obviously, she won, but with against a strong Democrat in a year where Republicans face headwinds potentially next year. It might be hard to sell this on the campaign trail. This would leave her open to some attacks, even from perhaps within her own party from moderates.
Could be. And in the meantime, of course, Republicans are saying the same thing about Democrats on immigration. As soon as some Democrats voted against that larger, more sweeping immigration bill, there were, posters immediately, ads, up,
right.
Calling them out and saying that they are trying to keep illegal alien criminals in the country. And, so, I mean, just 2026 is just starting early, and we all knew it would. But anyway, so that bill on Stein's desk, and we will see what he does with that one. I think that brings us to a quick break here. We will pause for our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie here with Paul Spey, talking about the week that was and the week coming up. One thing that we're going to see, and one thing we saw this week, kind of didn't, is the definition of biological sex. So this was a bill that was filed, and it didn't actually move. And then there was a bill that came over from the House that was anti-exploitation of women and children.
And that was unanimous in the House, right? That was sort of an anti-trafficking bill.
Yeah.
If I remember correct, it was like 112-0.
Yeah. So it goes over to the Senate, and they decide to put this language in it that attempts to define biological male and female by their sex chromosomes or their organs.
And so, how did this play out? It went to a committee first, right?
Right. So this was in a committee substitute. They call them a PCS, a proposed committee substitute, and it was discussed in committee. But then it was pulled the next day, and so apparently it got enough pushback that they decided not to. But there was a lot of comments from the Democrats on that committee, like Sophia Chitlik, for example, talking about the fact that this does not sort of recognize the fact that there are intersex people. There are. People are born that way sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's no sort of way to work that in this law. And so, anyway, it sort of also just erases the notion of trans people from
Right.
state policy, period,
Right.
which is right now very politically popular, especially on the Republican side of things. But anyway, we will see if that comes back up this week. I have a feeling we will.
Do you think, one reason that there are two reasons someone might do that, just talking plainly. One would be, perhaps they want to see, gender defined in very strict terms. And the other would be, if you insert something into a popular bill that Democrats might balk at, then you've got a gotcha, again, playing the politics, getting ready for 2026.
Right.
If they vote against this bill now, they can say, Democrat so-and-so and so-and-so voted against the anti-trafficking bill. And then there you go. You have a new campaign ad.
There you go, right there. Anyway, we'll see if that language maybe gets, I know that there were some members of Senate leadership that were involved in that anti-trafficking bill. So I would not be surprised if that language gets moved out of that bill and put into something else. We'll see. There are a couple of options out there. So, and is that time of year when things mysteriously appear in bills to which they are not otherwise obviously related?
Right. A few weeks ago, we had the crossover deadline where bills had to go from one chamber to another, but that now is the time of year where we learn just how many magic tricks people have when they can get their, their initiatives or bills that didn't pass into new bills that did pass and things like that.
We were talking, I was covering a press conference about psychedelic drug therapies this week, and Sophia Chitlik is one of the sponsors, along with Bobby Hainek, and she was asked, did this make crossover? She says, no, but we're aware that anything is possible all the time. I said, okay. That pretty much sums it up.
Right.
Rules are made to be broken. So you sat down this past weekend with Jason Simmons, the once and current GOP chairman. He won re-election at the state convention on Saturday. Tell me a little bit about that interview.
Right. We sat down with him a couple weeks before the convention, actually, and we talked about his race for re-election against grassroots challenger Brooke McGowan, and then, just what the next year would look like. And he won last weekend with 53% of the vote. It's pretty close.
That's closer than I thought.
Pretty close, especially considering the fact that he was endorsed by President Trump, not only last year when he took over from Michael Whatley, who went on to lead the Republican National Committee, but then again this year. Trump put out I believe it was a Truth Social post that credited Simmons with helping the Trump campaign win North Carolina in 16, 20, and now 24, and still 53% of the vote. You would think, Trump's sort of a kingmaker. Just, what was it, last year we saw a congressional race here in the Triangle where a woman running, what was her first name? Daughtry was her last name, ran against Brad Knott. And basically when Trump endorsed Knott, she dropped out. She had more money than he did. But after Trump's endorsement, that sort of sealed it.
Game over.
Game over, but not so much. And, one reason that Simmons, may have had to fight harder is there's been this resentment between sort of the grassroots activists and what they would call the establishment here in North Carolina for years. And
this is true in both parties.
For sure.
This is always a constant tension.
And a couple of years ago in 2022, after Democrats failed to win a single statewide race, we saw their chairwoman, Bobby Richardson, ousted for Anderson Clayton, who's still there. Simmons may have had to fight a little harder this year because while Trump carried the state, the party lost some of the bigger races. We saw the state Supreme Court race dragged on for months. They lost governor, AG. They lost the lieutenant governor's office as well. They lost education superintendent, an office they'd held for years. And so I think that's why he had to fight a little bit harder. And when we sat down with them, we asked, okay, at the time, Trump's tariffs had destabilized the market. And we said, well, how are you going to explain that to a base that, is expecting, a golden era, glory days,
right.
Trump campaigned
bring
on.
The prices down. Yeah.
That's right, bringing the prices down. He said, he described the tariffs as an attempt to bring back jobs to the state, as we all know, textiles and and the furniture and other industries sort of left in the 90s.
Yeah, we can't just rebuild those factories, though.
Right. And so I'm not an expert on those industries or what would need to be done to bring them back, but that was the answer he gave me.
Right.
And that, he hopes that voters will see the tariffs as Trump's attempt to make amends and bring some of those jobs back. Now, whether that happens, we'll see. We also asked him about Tom Tillis, famously unpopular with the Republican base. They censured him just 2 years ago for some, his history of questioning some of Trump's decisions, and then for working to protect same-sex marriage rights at the federal level. Well, Simmons reminded people the Republican Party itself, the organization, does not get involved in primaries, but that he expects to see a pretty robust competition. Now, he didn't say who he expects to jump in against Tillis or whether that would happen. He just said he expects sort of a fight there, and Tillis is going to have to sort of defend himself to the base. Right now, he has a financial advantage over the candidates who have declared, but we'll see that I think Tillis, for at least one of his races, was involved in what at the time was the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history. We could see that again next year as well.
Easily. Because, of course, control of Congress will be bitterly contested in 2020,
of course.
2026. So anyway, I think we're just about out of time, but thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us and joining us this week, and we hope you will catch up with us next week here on The Wrap.